right. I did receive a message that Mr. Roberts was going to be a little bit late today, but we'll just go ahead and go through the roll call. We'll start with Nicole Bailey. I don't think she is here. Andrea Chiribigo-Flora.
Present.
Thank you. John Conley.
Here.
Leonard Dittman. Not see him. Trevor Forbes.
Here.
Troy Hill. I do not see him. Jim House. Not see him either. Nicole Lawless. Don't see her. Michael Pierce. See you. Gregory Punsky.
Here.
See you as well. Thank you. Brandon Rich. Do not see Brandon. Jeffrey Reister.
Present.
Thank you. Nathan Riley, myself, I am present, and Joanne Rucha.
Here.
Thank you. All right, that's everybody.
I was on mute. Thanks, Mr. Riley. Appreciate that. Did everyone get a chance to take a quick look at the minutes from last meeting? If that is the case, I'd like to have someone motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
I'll go ahead and move to approve.
All right. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
All right. The meetings from last are approved. Thank you very much. Okay. So first and primary item on the agenda is the survey format that we worked on last week. Mr. Pierce has some experience in that, so he's able to guide us through some of the primary things we need to think through on surveys. I took a look at it. I feel pretty good about it, but quickly want to open it up for anyone that felt like they had any significant issues or any additions or subtractions or anything along those lines to kind of start the discussion.
So one thing I was hoping that we could talk about as a group that I think we didn't quite fully address last meeting was the ability for the survey to give us data from which we can extract pricing info for the difference between consensual and non-consensual tows. So so what we're getting so far is some fairly good data, but I was just trying to think through whether we might need some more so that we can determine ways of pulling out the some information from potential tows. So the where my thinking has gone on that, but I haven't had the time to actually look into it more carefully, is to look at the towing cost model that we have and the Utah study, and try and identify costs that are incurred by non-consensual tows that are not incurred by consensual tows, and try and get a reasonably good sense of the average difference in cost of doing those different kinds of tows. One of the ways we could do this is just by looking at the cost models that are already, the data from the cost models we already have. But then another option would be also to ask towing companies for some information that's specifically targeted to, say, costs that are related specifically to doing non-consensual tows. For example, first thing that came to mind is of what percentage do you spend simply on maintaining an impound lot? That might be, for example, one of the kinds of questions that came to mind. So I just wanted to use that as kind of a stepping off place to ask whether we are going to have enough information to distinguish the cost of consensual versus non-consensual tows, and if we don't, if there's some survey questions we can ask that would help us do that.
So I guess if I can paraphrase and you let me know if I'm correct, is basically saying, hey, we're gathering some information on average pricing, hopefully, that what towing companies are charging for their various types of consensual tows. But it would be nice to also have some data that would allow us to compare the costs of doing a consensual tow apples to apples with a non-consensual tow. Is that correct description?
Right.
I don't conceptually. I think that's great. I don't have and Mr. Connolly does a lot of both, and so he might have some ideas, but I don't have an answer for how that can be done in an elegant way. Mostly because as a general rule, the consent is not apparent for someone outside the industry, but consensual and non-consensual tows are kind of apples and oranges. Like they feel the same, right? Because you're using a tow truck, and people are like, towing a car is towing a car. Like, how is it different? But there's very much an apples and oranges comparison based on safety, time of day, risk to the drivers, waiting time, equipment, all that kind of stuff. Like you don't clean up, generally speaking, on a consensual tow, but there's a lot of cleanup required by towers on a non-consensual. So I'm not saying we can't be done. I'm saying I don't personally have an answer on how we could elegantly collect that in a way that would be meaningful. But maybe Mr. Connolly or others might have some ideas on that. But conceptually, I like the idea. What do you think, Mr. Connolly? Got any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, there's just in general, if I was to say, if I wasn't doing non-consensual, I would not need an impound facility, right? So everything that requires would be a cost savings. The facility itself, the people that you have to employ to man it, the insurance. I mean, that's a huge expense you could get off your plate right there. And then take away the 24-hour concept. If you don't have to answer your phone 24 hours a day, there's another savings. You don't have to man as many people. And so it's pretty intense when you start talking non-consent in the world of law enforcement and emergency towing. That requires 24 hours a day. That takes 3 men to man a truck for a 24-hour period. So you start adding that up. I mean, and really, when you look at what's your biggest expense is your employees. That's your biggest expense. So
Yeah,
I guess there's ways to basically, if you looked at what it was costing to do the non-consent towing, you could eliminate that, and those costs would probably show you right where your consent rates are. And you could ask for consent rates to verify that information.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand how we would ask that in a survey, and I could be wrong, but like, for example, to Mr. Connolly's point, like, even without, let's say that this is hypothetical because it's not how it works, but let's say that hypothetically you could do non-consent tows and not have to store the vehicles and take care of them and release them and all that kind of stuff. Even then you still have, like, you have to have 24/7 dispatch, for example, right? So you have people monitoring the lines, answering calls from the police department, providing information to the various law enforcement agencies, and how you would allocate that to an individual tow. I don't know how I think a company, if they took a lot of time and a detailed analysis, could probably figure out, like, I could probably do that, right? For like my company specifically, maybe, but I don't know how I would ask that question in a survey in which you're allocating costs. So allocating costs are, well, there's a reason there's like 1 million accountants out there that get paid lots and lots of money to do this. Like, allocating costs is like a little bit more complicated, and people do it differently, so it's inconsistent. So it's not, I don't have a good idea. It's not apparent to me that we could ask that in a survey that would provide any meaningful data to be able to compare the two. But if you have some some specific questions, Mr. Pierce, that we could maybe add, then maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's easier than I think. I don't know. But if you have some specific questions we could add to that. I think you're on mute still, Mr. Pierce. There you go. That gets me every time. Don't worry.
Yeah. Not yet. I was hoping basically to suss this out by just getting getting lists like what you're providing right now. And I was trying to write down some of it. But basically just to do an analysis, the main goal is just to ask what are costs that you incur doing non-consensual tow that you wouldn't incur for a consensual tow. List those out, and then try and get what might be total cost. It wouldn't have to be per tow, but just rather over the course of a year or so, how much are you spending on that? And if you have also, if you can think of that as a proportion of your total business costs, then you've got a fairly robust set of figures from which you can start to put together what's the cost of a consensual versus a non-consensual tow. How much more does it cost to do a non-consensual tow? So my main goal is to get those kinds of figures so we can do an analysis. From talking with you two right now, I think we're starting to get a list together. And then my next question is whether it would be helpful to have survey questions that address any of those that might be perhaps really good indicators. Insurance might be one of those. So for towers that don't do much in the way of non-consensual tows, what do their insurance rates look like compared to consensual towers? That might be a very good indication of the difference in the cost for the different kinds of tows. But also, if the other, so that's actually just a handoff back to you two, where what you think would be a good kind of indicator value that might be kind of a useful benchmark price that could help out with that. Yeah. Mostly, I'm looking for helpful data, but not necessarily the kind of data that would nail the case.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for it. And frankly, I would like to, because like from the perspective of like me and Mr. Conley, for example, I suspect not on all of them, but on some of the consensual rates, we'll find that, well, I don't know how good a data we'll have, but consensual rates often, if you pretend they're apples to apples, will be slightly lower than non-consensual. And so from a person who does non-consensual, we want to show that like they're not apples to apples. So when we can show these extra costs, it presents a better picture of why non-consensual rates just are higher because they cost more and stuff like that. So I would like to be able to elegantly show that. I don't believe we're going to be, because it has to do with cost allocation. Like that's going to be a question of allocating expenses across the business that you may or may not have if you were doing consensual versus non-consensual. I don't think that there's a way to do that in a survey, or at least in a survey that will get filled out and that is like reasonably short, that'll provide any meaningful data, unfortunately, is my opinion on that. But I'm interested to see if other folks have any opinion on what I just said. Anybody else? No. Okay.
The only thing I can think of is if you were to ask the cost of maybe their property, what their expenses on the property, maybe annually rent, mortgage, things like that. Maybe you could do the same thing with insurance for that, garage keepers, things like that. I don't know. You could probably ask a few other things. Employee rate related. That would be it.
One example, Mr. Pierce, that is like highlighting your point, I think, that might highlight why it would be difficult is not all towers, but like some towers, like if you have certain contracts with municipal or law enforcement agencies, like you're required to respond. So it's not a thing in which like, hey, if I got a driver available, I'll go pick up this like consensuals like that. If AAA were to call me, I can choose to do it or not do it. And so I can fit that business into kind of my operational structure when it's convenient for me. Whereas there might be a tower that's like, hey, I'm on this rotation. I have a responsibility to CSPD or state patrol or whatever. I have to be available 24 hours a day. And if maybe they have one driver ready for that rotation, like in the middle of the night, for example. And it may be that they actually lose money during that nighttime period to pay that driver hourly and keep them on the payroll and stuff, but they have no choice because they have to have capacity to respond to that call. And so then that cost has to be spread over all the other tows they do at different times of the day. Whereas like consensual, you literally can do it whenever you want. And often towers will do this. They do a little bit of consensual. And frankly, we do a tiny bit as well, even though we're more focused. Like I'll do a consensual tow when it's convenient for me. And so the expenses is how do I allocate that? Because the driver was sitting around anyway. So I kind of was paying for that consensual tow regardless. I mean, you do have to pay for gas and there is some expenses. But this concept of like discretionary versus non-discretionary work really makes it difficult to untangle those two and allocate the expenses accordingly. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, very much. It helps. It also helps just trying to think through what we can do, nonetheless, after the survey. But I see how it would be difficult to get that into a survey question.
Yeah.
But I think just when we work through this later, we really do need to put down this list because this is really helpful right now, just in setting out what the various costs are. And so like with your example right now, you could potentially compare a garden variety consensual tower who doesn't do any non-consent and a non-consent tower who doesn't do any consent tows as these kind of idealized models, and then ask what your different employee pay costs are, and then basically look at the cost difference of maintaining employees who are on call 24/7 versus employees who aren't.
Right.
And so there are ways of extracting those cost differences, and I think we should pursue those. But getting back to the what's on the table now, I agree that would be hard to pull out from the survey.
Yeah. But to your point though, I think you're right that like maybe we can't really like mathematically measure those, but talking through those and us all understanding at least directionally might help us in the future to think through those. So Mr. Riley, see your hand up.
So I just wanted to ask, because I feel like a lot of what we've been talking about is captured in the survey that we've drafted in certain ways or another. Maybe not quite to the extent that's been discussed, but I feel like a lot of the foundation is there. Just to maximize our time, do we want to just throw the draft of the survey up and go through it point by point? And again, if we need to make adjustments, that's fine. But I feel like this is a good foundation to work off of rather than, just kind of going off a whole bunch of discussion points. And
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I agree, Nate. Let's throw it up and go through it. And then I would argue after we go through it, if anyone has any, like, I would call significant issues, right? That like, hey, I really, really, really believe that we need to add this or subtract this. Then I want to talk through those things. But to your point, in the interest of time and it being August, right? I think we should, as long as anyone have any significant issues, we should take a vote and try to get it approved quite quickly. But yeah, Nate, if you throw it up, that'd be awesome.
okay, it should be up. Let me know if you want me to zoom in a little more than it is.
I can see it, but what about everybody else?
Could you please? It's kind of small.
Yeah, sure. Is that a little better?
Once more.
Okay. About that. A little more? Okay. Little more, no problem.
That works.
So, Trevor, do you just want to go through these question by question, and if we need to adjust
Yeah.
them, we can?
Yeah, I'll go through them. So obviously company name, PUC permit number, any tower that operates in the state. Well, they better have a PUC permit number. I guess if we get one without one, then Nate can check into that. Current number of trucks for each haul category. We discussed this in our working group. Those are generally the categories that towers will utilize to break out their tows. And so that one's pretty easy. They're going to know that off the top of their head. So one's pretty straightforward. Current number of employees. We talked about breaking out kind of management, administrative, and stuff like that during our working group. And we came to the general conclusion that that's just hard with small businesses. Who's management and who's administrative kind of changes day to day. And so we thought full-time employees in general would give us pretty much the same amount of information. Business location, address. This is another area we talked through of towers have a location somewhere, but they may service possibly all over the state. But as a general rule, you're going to do way more work near your kind of general principal place of business. But we left them a service area place to put a different zip code if it turns out that for some strange reason they do business somewhere very different from where they're located. And this will generally give us the ability to figure out where these responses are coming from.
Yeah.
Mr. Pierce, I see Mr. Pierce's hand up.
Yeah, I'm just looking about mechanics of this, just because zip codes are relatively small areas, and so I'm thinking that the business address will be super helpful. But if we're asking service area and by zip code, that's a lot of zip codes to put in. And so just in terms of the form, I think you'd need a lot more space than is there. And for any online version, you need quite a few the ability to put in quite a few zip codes.
I would say get rid of zip code in the service area.
Yeah, there might be an easier way to spell out your service area.
If I was answering that, I would say Colorado.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think real quick, and then I'll switch over to Nate. I'm agnostic on this, but I'm completely okay. I'll just be honest with you, removing the service area. I don't think it provides any meaningful information. Generally speaking, tow companies are going to do business like around their principal location. And if they do it in lots of other areas, that bubble's very big, right? And so they're generally, it's generally not gonna be the case where like you have your service location, but you don't do any business around there, but then you have this other area where you provide services. That just generally doesn't apply. And so like Mr. Connolly, for example, literally he would be like Colorado because he provides services all across the state for heavy haul and all kinds of specialized type things.
It'd be North America because about 90% of my business is Colorado, 10% is out of state.
Yeah. So, anyways, I'm okay with moving that, but I don't have a strong opinion. Mr. Riley, what are your thoughts?
So two things on this question. First off, yeah, no, I'm not opposed to removing it entirely either, or maybe adjusting it in some way. If we adjusted it, maybe we could, instead of having it be referenced as zip code, maybe it's counties or maybe just the primary county. Because you might have somebody operating in the Denver metro area that operates primarily in Arapahoe County and also operates in other adjacent counties, but primarily in Arapahoe. That's an alternative. So that was my first point. Second point was in regards to using under 3A, the zip code as the principal business address. I think we're okay doing that because I had a discussion with Mr. Roberts about this, and we have an internal PUC tool that we use for a different purpose that could easily be transitioned to be used for this as well. So if we're able to aggregate a whole bunch of zip codes of all the respondees, then it'll be pretty easy for us to then transpose that into this tool that we use internally at the PUC for a similar purpose and essentially be able to space out where all these people are operating. I know I described it a little bit in our last meeting. It's the same tool I'm referring to, and I checked with Mr. Roberts, and he said it was all right to use, and there was no confidentiality concerns with using it. So we're happy to do that.
Awesome.
So to
Yeah,
summarize, To summarize,
Go
I
ahead.
think we've got the data already. We don't really need to ask that, just based upon the
I think so.
based upon the reporting that's already available.
Yeah, I don't think the service area is going to give us any meaningful info outside of asking for there may be some outlier randomly somewhere, some little tower who he puts his principal place of business here and turns out he tows somewhere else for some strange reason. But in the aggregate, I don't think it's going to tell us anything mostly.
Okay. Does anybody have any objections to taking it out?
Okay. All right. 4, estimate what percentage of your revenues go towards covering the following costs. So during our working group, we talked through and again, y'all relied on me and Mr. Connolly and Mr. Riley for this, but we just kind of were like, this just is the primary cost for tow companies. And so those costs combined might equal 60% of the cost structure, 70% of the cost structure. And so we thought it prudent to use those. And we believe that most towing companies are going to be able, at least in their head, they may not call on their P&L, they may not call it labor management, but they're going to understand what we mean when we put that. And so this is basically them just saying, hey, out of all my costs, this labor and management makes up 30% of the costs I have, and fuel makes up 18%, whatever. And so this hopefully will give us a little bit of an idea on cost structure. Mr. Prunsky.
With those percentages, is that pretty easy for you guys to get like an accurate representation of the percentage, or are we just going to get a bunch of guesstimates?
You're going to get a bunch of guesstimates. Yeah, I'm just to be honest. There'll be some towers that will literally go look at their P&L and do a little bit of math. And some of them won't, or their books aren't good enough, or maybe they have another related business that does something else and the financials are kind of combined a little bit. So they're going to have to guess there. So we're not going to, we should be cautious not to put too much faith in the precision of these numbers, but directionally they should help us, I think.
Okay.
All right. Number 5 is, as opposed to a percentage, asking in real life, how much did you spend in 2021 on labor for management, on fuel, on insurance, and ideally P&L, and put that actual number down. And so you're getting a percent. So how severe is this cost relative to the rest of your cost structure? And in gross terms, how much are you actually paying for this cost? And that's what number 5 gives us, or we hope it gives us. On number 6, we settled on, because we want to get an idea of like how rapidly these costs are decreasing, and are they decreasing faster than CPI or possibly slower than CPI? And so the purpose of this question is trying to help us understand, like, this CPI metric that we've been using, is it way off the mark, or does it look like it's generally accurate? This, to Mr. Prunty's question earlier, is for sure going to be a guess on the part of the towers. But again, it's kind of what we got. We kind of settled on going from 2015, which was when the last, the last study was done, to 2021, omitting kind of recent 2022, especially because it's the inflation stuff is just so crazy, and the towers aren't really going to know what's going on anyway. And so we just want to wash out all this craziness that hopefully we can look at later. But right now it's just kind of in flux. And so that's why we settle in 2021 for that. And then number 7 is just in the aggregate, like all your costs together, how much did they increase in 2015 to 2019? And then during COVID. And so we decided we wanted to kind of drill into this idea that maybe the last 2 years are severe outliers, and it'd just be nice to know that. All right, number 8. So this one we hope that they're able to figure out because it's a grid. But it's what percentage of your overall tows are in the following weight classes, tow types. There was no way to make this one super simple, because it turns out when you combine different types of tows, which is law enforcement, consensual and non-consensual under the new definition of non-consensual, and the weight classes, it ends up being 3 times 5. So there ends up being 15 different categories. And so towers will have to just basically go fill that in. I don't think it'll be, as long as they understand what we're asking, I don't think it'll be as hard as it looks, because most towers aren't going to have something in all of those categories. Mr. Connolly might be an exception because he does a wide range of types of tows, but most towers are going to be, you know, the upper left quadrant or the lower right quadrant. They're going to cluster around like, hey, I do consensual and non-consensual, but I only do light duty, or something along those lines. So we're hopeful they'll be able to figure that out. Number
Question
9. Yeah, Mr. Connolly.
We're up above in the top left corner. Let's put GBWR.
Yeah, good point. Good. Awesome. Number 9. This is, so in our, I guess, mandate, they kind of, in this last towing bill, they added this little, I don't know, rider, if you will, and said, hey, we also want you to do what you can to give us some information on how consensual and non-consensual rates compare. To our discussion earlier, and we've all figured this out because we've been talking about this for months, that like they're not, it's very hard to do that. They're just like not the same thing. But obviously the lawmakers don't know that there's a difference between the two. And so they wanted to provide some insights. And so while I think that this isn't going to provide super valuable information, it is our job to at least try. And so maybe I'm wrong. And so we have this question on here to try to get their average consensual tow rates for these different weight classifications. And we also did that from 2015 to 2021 to see if we might be able to glean some information on how those have changed and to see if that kind of mimics what we would expect to see had those been regulated rates that would go up with the CPI index increase. So that's the hope behind that question. So that's it. With that, I'll stop and see if anyone has any significant concerns about this survey, with the exception, and we'll save this till the end. So other concerns besides the one I'm going to mention, let's talk about first. But we agreed to talk through if this would be, what's it called? Like they would disclose the company, or if it would be anonymous. So if a tow company is required to say who they are when they submit the survey or not. So I think that's a separate thing I want to save till the very end. But as far as the actual survey and questions and structure, does anyone have any significant concerns or issues with this format? Okay. All right. So now let's move into the next question. Before we'll answer that, and then we can hopefully take a vote on the survey, is the question of it being anonymous or not. And so I guess let's start with anyone who believes strongly that it should not be anonymous. Please, let's talk through that and let us know kind of what your thoughts and concerns are on. Mr. Riley.
I've heard the points people have made in previous meetings about not wanting this to be anonymous, and I totally get that the positions that they've outlined and that they've described that support that position. What I would say is I think it'll be a lot easier to set it up like it is now, where they would put their company name and their permit number, which essentially identifies who they are. They could do either or, and we'd be able to figure out who they are. I think it'll be a lot easier to make that more palatable to the people who would potentially respond to this survey if we make it clear in the language that we use when the survey goes out that this is, yes, it is identifying you as a tow carrier, and this is information that's associated with you, this particular tow carrier. But as long as we make it clear, as we've had several discussions about with Mr. Roberts, is that we are essentially going to take all these responses and create an aggregate set of data, which will then be used in the cost model and however else we want to use it, which will be anonymized. And that's what is going to be what's made public and available. So I think as long as we phrase, the whatever the canned statement when this gets sent out, as long as it contains information saying that although the requested information does include company specific information, all responses will be aggregated and it, as a result of that, will be anonymized. I think people won't have a problem with it. It's just my personal opinion.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Pierce.
Yeah, I think it is essential that we get the company name and the permit number. That's the integrity of the data really depends on that. Without that information, we could get made up figures. There's no way of double checking. And also, just to hark back to the service area question, if we don't have the PUC permit number, we're not going to be able to get that information. And so this kind of identifying information is really, really essential. And I don't, yeah, the integrity of the survey just goes out the door without that information.
Okay. Any other, Mr. Pierce, I see your hand up again.
Whoops, whoops, no, sorry. That was supposed to be a mic.
No worries. And Andrea, do you have any, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the past you'd had some opinions on it being anonymous or not. I'm curious if you had any ideas or thoughts on that question.
I don't think it should be anonymous. And also, I know I talked a lot about like financials and official and non-official financials and being able to verify that. And I think it was included on this, but
Yeah, we during our last working group, we I believe we talked through briefly about financials, and most of us came to the conclusion that there's just like no scenario where towing companies are going to provide their financials. But so that's mostly the conclusion we came to, is like it's just not going to happen. And then Mr. Roberts, I believe, I don't know if he's on right now or not. Mr. Roberts, did we ask the question of you if that's something that we could even compel towing companies to do? I think we thought that because they're regulated entities, but they're not regulated entities in the same way that a utility is, that's been granted a monopoly by the government, that there's no way to compel towing companies to provide financials, but maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, that was, thanks, Trevor. That was my opinion as well, that there's really no way to compel it under our current statutes.
Okay. But Andrea, you are, I guess, pro non-anonymous, right? So I think I said that right. Okay. Anyone else, any thoughts on that question before we take a quick vote on anonymous versus non-anonymous? Does anyone have any really strong thoughts or opinions on it being anonymous? I guess the other side of the argument.
I just know of history. Most of the time when they put their name on there, we didn't get very good turnout. But
Okay.
I think it should just be in their permit renewal and make it simple. Make it a requirement there.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're there on the computer renewing, that'd be the best place for this.
Right. All right. With that, Nate, if you don't mind taking a tally, I'd like to take a vote on that particular question. First, all in favor, and just use your little like hand raising button to vote.
If you just to make it more efficient, if you want, I typed up a quick poll that everybody in here can respond to. It
I
says,
forgot about the poll.
it says, and it's just better for us to track our votes. So it says, should the tow survey be structured to allow for anonymous responses? ? And then it's just a yes or no.
Okay. And that's that little button that has like the triangle and square and circle. We just click on there.
Yeah, it'll pop up in just a second.
Okay, awesome. I forget about that poll thing. It's very handy.
Okay, it's up. So if it should pop up in a little window, but if you don't see it, just go to the little triangle, square, circle button in the lower right-hand corner, and then click on polls, and it should be there.
Should the tow survey structure to
So no means you don't want it anonymous. Yes means you do want it to be available for anonymous. So I think we have 7 total votes before, so far, and I think we have I think there's 9 people in here, and we've only had 7 votes. I can't vote because I posted the survey, but I'm a no vote. So I think we're missing one person who has not.
Well, I
voted.
think Mr. Roberts is one of the 9, and I think he's.
Well, no, there's 9 members in here.
Oh, got it. I see.
So there still is one outstanding vote if you haven't voted yet.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, still 7.
Maybe someone's abstaining.
Yeah, abstentions I think are fine as well. So
Nate, does it say who hasn't?
I don't see that.
Mm.
So with my vote as a no, it's 6 no votes, 2 yes votes, and 1
Missing.
no vote. Abstention, I guess is what we would call it.
Okay, so you said there's 6 no, 2 yes, 1 abstaining, but the I guess the no votes carry it either way, even if that other person's a yes. So I think we're okay. So in this case, I'm getting confused. So the survey will require the respondent to say who they are. So it will not be anonymous.
Yeah, and we can make that clear in the language.
Yeah,
we can essentially we can say that the survey, this could be its own little mini paragraph in what we're sending out, and it can say something along the lines of, we are requesting you to identify your company name and permit number. However, after the data has been collected, it will be aggregated and anonymized, so this information will no longer be available to the public. Something like that. That way, they're encouraged. They'll feel some protection in actually putting their name and permit number down. Which again, I agree with Mr. Pierce that I think will give some credibility to the data as well.
Okay, good. So the vote is carried that it will require disclosure. So it will not be an anonymous survey. And then as a practical matter, I'm fine with that. I don't think anyone will mind what you just stated, Nate. Provided that I would just say, if we're going to say that, let's be confident that that's the case. Are the surveys, so will the data be aggregated at the PUC level and then given to the task force, or will the task force be able to access each individual survey as members of the task force?
I mean, I think it's up to us how we want to do it. I'm happy to. So one of the things that I've had meetings with internally at the PUC is how we're going to manage this survey process. Our plan is to use. We're actually creating a new tool that will allow us to blast emails out to particular carrier sets. So like we could say every active towing carrier, and it'll allow us to send out an email blast to that. It's a function we've been working on for a while that we're finally going to be having hopefully within the month.
Awesome.
So that's the plan, is to send it out through that new methodology. We'll attach obviously copies of the survey, but when it comes back, we've set it up so that it will funnel into basically the mechanism we would be using to send it out will also be able to receive, so that the towing carriers who receive it can just fill it out and just hit reply. It won't be coming from like a no reply email, because that'll just complicate things.
Gotcha.
So that's the plan as of right now, is to use that kind of a system where it will then come back to that same constructed email address associated with this tool. And then what I'm happy to do at that point is to essentially just create some way to aggregate it all into like a spreadsheet or something, which of course would then be circulated to everybody.
Okay, gotcha. So all the individual responses would come in. Someone at the PUC could be able to aggregate that data to create averages and medians and all that kind of stuff. And then the task force would be presented that aggregated information.
Well, it'll be aggregated, but you'll still see all the different data sets.
Gotcha.
But through that process, that would be the step where we would quote unquote anonymize it. I think the information will still be available to everybody in the task force, but in regards to what we will subsequently be making public, that's what will be anonymized.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. And then, and I'm great with all that. I just want to make sure that if we're telling towers that like, hey, like, don't worry, like this will be aggregated and anonymous, and then someone does a core request, for example, and says, I want to see John Connolly's response to this survey. that doesn't happen, because then you're never going to get anyone to fill out a survey again. So, and if that's what we do, that's okay too. We just need to make sure we're not telling towers that it's going to be aggregated when maybe it isn't. Mr. Roberts, will these individual surveys be, I guess, I don't know if the right term, exposed to a Cora request?
So Cora, which is the Colorado Open Records Act, for anybody who doesn't use the abbreviation like Trevor and I do, has a couple of different ways that a custodian of record, which in this case would be the PUC and the task force, they have two ways that a custodian of record can handle requests for information. One is an optional, and there's a whole section of Cora that says
Mr. Roberts froze, I think.
we're back. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You're back.
Okay, so getting to the important part. There's a category in Cora that says the custodian shall not allow the inspection of the following types of document or types of information. And in that is trade secrets, privileged information, and confidential commercial, financial, or other data. So I think that identifying who is responding to the survey, to the surveys, would fall into the shall not disclose category under Cora. So I think we could keep that information within the PUC and it would not be subject to a Cora request.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Okay, so in that case, I feel good about saying what Nate did, because it sounds like we have standing to actually not provide that.
And just to be clear, I mean, all the individual surveys will be available for inspection to anybody in the task force that wants to look at them. I'm happy, or someone on my staff, we're happy to go through that information and aggregate it so it's a little easier to understand. So that I think we will, we're happy to do that step once the time period is expired, whatever time period we want to give them to respond, a month or whatever we want to give them. Then again, we'll have all that information available. We'll have it in a particular area. If anybody wants to see it, we're happy to share it. But then what probably people will be most interested in is aggregated information, because that'll be the easiest to get that wider context and perspective.
Yeah. So my, I guess, an opinion on this, that if that's the case, if individual task force members are going to be able to see the actual individual responses, we should not tell towers that, hey, don't worry, your information is going to be aggregated and not made public. I think there's and maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's a non-trivial chance that will not be the case if that information is available to the entire task force. So I would just argue that, like, let's not promise that if we aren't 100% certain that that's going to be the case, that it is going to be confidential, and confidence level that it would be if it's provided to the entire task force is quite low. But I may be the only one with that opinion.
Now, Trevor, I think you are. Troy raised that in the chat.
Oh yeah. That how do we know that they wouldn't be leaked? And I think the answer is we just don't. And so, I mean, we voted. It's going to be non-anonymous, and I think I'm good with that. And I think we voted. But let's just not make a promise that we can't collectively guarantee. Is what I would say.
Well, there are two different levels too we could work with here. One is just as you're suggesting, Mr. Forbes, then there's the option of a non-disclosure agreement of some sort. But at any rate, I mean, there are ways of protecting this so that we are, as committee members or as task force members, bound to keep the information confidential.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between making a statement that identifying information and as it pertains to a survey would not be made available to the public, and that the information would be anonymized, in comparison to it getting out through some other means. I think us making that statement is fair and will encourage responses. I mean, obviously you can never 100% control what other people are going to do when they have access to information, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
What
That's
if-
just my thoughts on that.
What about if we said this? Because we could guarantee this. We could say that the information is going to be aggregated and not disclosed by the PUC publicly. And the outside of the PUC, it will only be shared with the towing task force. And then you're at least telling the tower, these are the two groups of people that are going to have access to the information, and the tower can make their own decision on if that's okay with them or not. Does that make sense? But just let towers know that, hey, like, just, you know, the towing task force is going to have access to this. Any problems with that approach?
I still think there needs to be some kind of a pledge on the part of the task force members. Yes, I agree with Joanne's comment that that our membership on the task force is precarious if we were to let any of that information out. But nonetheless, I think there really should be an understanding that this is confidential information and that we are, as task force members, committed to keeping it confidential.
What if we said something along the lines of the responses collected through this process, or the responses to this survey will be collected and aggregated by the PUC and shared with the towing task force for analysis and interpretation.
Yeah, I think that's I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure we're being transparent about who's getting the information. So yeah, I think that statement sounds great. And then the towers can make their own decisions on what they want to do. So let's go with that, unless someone has a problem with that approach. I don't know that needs a vote. Mr. Connolly.
I don't see where the task force would need the individual companies' information to make those decisions. If we get the information as a whole, it doesn't matter what company is on the top of the list. I mean, the information is what we're after. We give two shits about the company. It's the information that we get on what it costs to do tows, right? So I don't think if the task force shouldn't even have access to the company's name, just the information.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. But you know, we voted, so it's going to be, it is what it is. But like I said, you know, the good thing is we're telling towers that this is what's happening. And so if towers don't want to respond, then they obviously do not have to. And we'll see if it changes response rates or not.
No, I'm just saying when the PUC gets it, I mean, yes, the PUC needs the name, etc. When they get it. But
I see what you're saying.
Puts that information together. When PUC brings that information to the task force, it doesn't need to have company names on that information.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying the handoff from the PUC aggregating it to the task force. What is the purpose, if not to expose it to somebody else? What is the purpose to not have it anonymized at that level and provided to all the task force members? I don't know the answer to that, but maybe someone has some ideas. Mr. Pierce?
The main thing I can think of here that I would like to have some access to, but would be okay with not having access if somebody else was doing it, but is the integrity checks. And so one of the issues with integrity checks are you who you say you are? And are you giving us made up information, or are you are you making stuff up out of whole cloth, or are you actually providing us with reasonably good faith estimates? And so there's a few integrity checks that really should be part of this process, where we're double checking the locations and and number of employees against existing data, and things like that. And if I were doing the analysis myself, these kind of close analysis, I'd want access to that. But I guess I'm okay if there are people within the PUC who can do that, who could be potentially serve that integrity check function, and so that the task force itself members could be at arm's length. But it's still important for me that those integrity checks are done, and if I were the one doing it, I'd want to see that information.
Yeah. Joey Ann made a comment that I think I agree with. It makes a lot of sense. Is basically maybe we're overthinking it. That like, look, people know that there's, people aren't dumb. They know that there's, hey, if I'm providing this stuff, that it could be leaked or used against me or something, and that's just the life in general. And that these businesses can choose to respond or not respond accordingly, and that's their choice. And hopefully we still get some good engagement. So I agree with Joey Ann. Like, I think we're overthinking it a little bit. Let's just kind of do the disclosure like we talked about, explain to them, to towers, hey, this is going to be aggregated and blah, blah, blah. And then they can make their own decision. Is kind of my position right now. So, all right. I think we're good on that. So we took a vote. It is going to be not anonymous, and we'll see what happens. All right. So I guess at that point, Nate, is there anything else we need to do beyond letting you run with it and getting the survey out?
So first off, we'll have to vote and make sure that this is the survey everybody wants to use, and we don't need any additional tweaks to it.
Good point.
So that's the first step. And then I think we need, beyond that, I think we need to develop what the language in the email that we're sending out has to say. And I'm already starting to put that together, which we can then work together on and make sure we have that finalized as well.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's we'll take a vote real quick to approve the survey, and then Nate will let you jam out the email message, and we'll take a quick vote on that, and then we'll be ready to go. So can I get a motion to approve the current survey format?
Motion.
All right, I have a motion from Mr. Pierce. Can I get a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right. Any objections to approving it as is?
All right, I'll send out another poll.
A poll, okay.
That's just the best way to track it. So I have it listed as approve of the survey as drafted, ? Yes, no. So yes means yes, let's send the survey out. No means you don't want to send the survey out.
Great.
And that is live.
Okay, so yes means yes, send it out. No means don't send it out. Got it.
Nate, did you send out the question? If so, I might have accidentally clicked the wrong button and said I wasn't going to answer it. I had a brief pop-up and it didn't appear.
Maybe we could just mark Joy Ann mentally.
So you didn't submit a vote?
To accept, but I didn't. I think I accidentally clicked off the question.
Here, click the little triangle, square, circle button in the bottom right corner, and select polls.
Oh, I see it. Okay.
Okay.
I found it. Thank you.
Sure. All right, so we got 6 votes so far. I think there's still 9 of us here. I'll be a yes vote, which I'll add into the record later after it gets populated. So we currently have the 7 votes again, 6 yes, 1 no. I'm a yes vote as well, so it'll actually be 7 votes yes, 1 vote no, and then we have that outstanding vote again.
Okay. I'm sorry, what were those numbers again, Nate?
With my vote, it's 7 yes, 1 no, and we have 1 outstanding, because I think there's still 9 of us here.
Okay, good. So regardless of the missing one, it carries. So approved. Next, let's move on. Nate, if you can kind of, I guess we'll all kind of hang out while you type out what you just discussed.
Yeah, it's so basically what I'm putting together, and I'll post it right here. I was working on it in a different document, but hold on, let me transpose it over here. So I think it's important to identify that this is a task force survey. I think we can put some language in here about what we're statutorily required to do in regards to like what the report we need to make to the commission. Okay.
I'd say, and I don't know how to talk about the consensual. How do I say that? And prevailing
how about-
rates.
Including a comparison between
Good.
Consensual and non-consensual rates.
Perfect. I
Um,
like that.
let's see what else.
I think that mostly covers it. And then we say, hey, the towing task force is going
Responding to this survey will assist the towing task force in. I want to make it clear to them that like this information will help us, and
So,
not having
towing
the
fast-
information is a problem.
maybe say assist the towing task force in developing comprehensive recommendations to the Public Utilities Commission. Maybe.
Okay. I might use slightly different language, but this will be the basic outline.
Cool.
Signing the survey will assist in developing a more complete and thorough report to the commission, which will assist them in any potential adjustments to maximum tow rates, something like that. I want it to be clear to them that, if they submit stuff, that's going to be in their interest because it's going to apply towards whatever the report is, probably.
Right.
So if nothing else, it'll help us get a clearer view of what the rates are now, what they might be in the future, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And
Great.
then, and then the last part is what we were talking about before. The responses to this survey will be collected and aggregated by the PUC, which will then be shared with the members of the towing task force for further review and analysis. So
Great.
something like this. This will be essentially what, unless anybody else has any ideas of anything else you want to put in here.
Well, I think it's pretty important to put in that it won't be available through core requests.
I think that was Mr. Roberts' general opinion, but I don't know that's definitive enough for us to put that. But maybe. Ms. Rusha. See
I
Joanne.
thought that was. That was.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, Joanne.
Oh, thanks, Trevor. So I just want to go back to my earlier comment. We can't force people to participate. I don't know if that for a comment, is really going to make a difference. Well, I've heard that, Auntie, but the one thing I think would be useful is just to emphasize that this task force does not set the rates. I know it says that in that last sentence on the first paragraph, it hints that, but I just wanted to give the feedback that maybe we just make it very, very, very clear we're not the arbitrator of rates, right? We're just making a report. So that was the feedback I have. And then perhaps we could also just remind folks of where our website is, and anybody can attend public comment meeting or, shoot your thoughts, complaints or whatever over to us, the PUC. So.
Yeah, maybe we could, Mr. Riley, maybe provide a link to the towing task force's our little web page or whatever we have within the PUC website. So maybe, because also to Joanne's point, maybe it's an opportunity to educate towers on what the towing task force is and all that kind of stuff could be good, I suppose. And then while he's doing that, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Pierce mentioned us explicitly stating that this information wouldn't be available to a Cora request. And I guess the question is that something that we can or should explicitly state in this, or should we just kind of like leave that alone?
I think we can. I don't think we should explicitly state it. I think we could get to that point by referencing something about how we're going to, what was the word you used, compile the information, or use some fancy PUC word. I don't know right now.
Aggregation or
Aggregation. That's it. You're going to aggregate the information from, into more anonymous format. I think that would be fine.
Okay, great. Okay, we got the link. So any other significant ideas, concerns, additions, subtractions before we hopefully take a vote on this portion? All right.
Let me just add one more thing here. So
Yep.
I do think we should add something in here about how they are to respond. So I'd say please fill out the attached form in print out or PDF fillable formats and return the responses in a reply email to this message. At least that's the plan. And again, there's a chance I might need to alter this just a little bit in case situations change and we end up out a different way. But this is basically what it's going to be.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we're all good with some adjustments to make it work. I think that's perfectly fine. Should we put like a no later than date? Like, should we put a?
Oh yes, that's a good point.
Maybe, because otherwise people might be like, oh, I'll get to that later, and then they just don't.
How about please respond no later than? Do you want to make it like 1 month? Is that a good response time, or do you want to make it like 2 or 3 weeks? I mean, what's
if someone's not doing it in 30 days, they're not doing it.
30 days is good.
Yeah.
Please respond.
I think it's too long. I think 30 is too long.
Yeah, I think so. That maybe they'll just like put out some maybe 2 weeks.
How about 20?
Yeah, I'd say 2 weeks. I mean, 14 days, maybe 21 days. I mean, pretty soon, if you have something you put it on the back burner, chances are you're going to forget about it.
Yeah,
That's a good.
I would say 2 weeks too.
I agree. Yeah, let's do 14 days. 14 days is good. It's kind of like
and
me
then
starting.
I'll put the date in. So I'll say, please respond within 20 days of this email, no later than, and then I'll insert whatever that 20 day is, or the 21 day is.
And I think
So
let's
three
do
weeks.
Let's do 14. I agree with Mr. Pierce and Mr. Connolly that like there's probably some psychology to giving people too much time, kind of like me starting to eat healthy. Like I have the rest of my life to do it, so I just don't. So 14 days I think is good unless somebody has a strong opinion on longer. All right. Okay. Any other additions? Going once, going twice. All right. Can I get a motion to approve this? What would we call this? Survey introduction, I guess. It's called a survey introduction. Can I get a motion to approve the survey introduction?
I'll make that motion.
All right, Mr. Riley, motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Joanne seconds. All right, Mr. Riley, can you put up a poll?
Yeah. Here's how I'm going to phrase it. I'm going to say approved survey introduction language, comma, with any necessary administrative
Changes.
changes. Yep.
Great.
So again, that'll give me the little bit of latitude to adjust it if that's necessary when it gets sent out.
Okay.
So let me so yes means you're good with the language. No means you're not good with the language.
Great.
And that's live.
Yep, man.
Yeah, we got 5 votes so far.
Now, here's a technical question. Should the towing members of this task force, there's only 2 of us, should we abstain from filling that out? That's probably for Roberts.
Yeah, question for Mr. Roberts.
I can't think of a reason why you would abstain. Do you have a thought about that, John?
No, you never know in today's world, someone might think we're trying to manipulate or
Game the system.
Yeah. You'd be. I'm thinking about it in terms of like other DORA boards, and if it's if we're doing this for information gathering, I think the information about your companies and your towing practices is relevant to the survey. I think it's important to the statewide information.
Okay.
Great.
Good question. Thank you.
So we have, since we're still in the middle of a vote, so we have 5 yes votes, 1 no vote. I'll add myself to the yes column, so it's 6 yes votes, 1 no vote. So I think that means we have 2 no votes. So
Okay. All right. The survey introduction is approved. I'm very impressed with us. We got our mostly survey ready to go. So good job, everybody. All right. So we got a little under 45 minutes left, and we still want some time for public comment. But now that we got this behind us, or at least the drafting of it, does anyone, I don't have anything else on the agenda. Does anyone have any items they want to discuss or questions or any other topics they'd like to run through while we still have some time? Mr. Riley.
The only other thing I was going to add is I do think, because we are working with a pretty truncated timetable, and again, I'm going to get this survey out absolutely as soon as I can. It's something I've been stressing for months. We have to get this information out there so we can start getting the information back. And I like that we're using kind of a small window for responses. I hope that doesn't quash the responses we get, but I'm hopeful that we'll get at least a decent response. Somewhere between 50 and 100 responses is what I'm hoping for. But I do still think, because we have this small window, we're going to have to be ready for when that information comes back and we have the aggregate together. So I still think we should probably think about holding another work group between now and our next scheduled meeting in September, just to start going through that cost model that we have available, just to kind of sort through how we plan to integrate the information when we get it back, when it's ready to go, just to minimize time and that we're ready to go. As soon as we get that aggregate information, we're ready to plug it into something and run. I think that would be a good use of time.
I agree. Why don't we target, I guess, do you think if you guys could get the survey out before next Wednesday, then 2 Wednesdays after, then we got to aggregate it. So maybe I'm trying to think when would allow enough time for you guys to get it out. We get responses in that 14-day window and then aggregate the information for us. So what are your thoughts on that, Nate? Like, what would be a good time for that date?
So my hope, and I think I have a meeting, I want to say it's next week. I think it's next week with our OIT group to talk about this tool that they're developing for us. So once that is, I'm hoping they'll have something functional that we can use by then. If not, I think there's another mechanism through which we could do this. But we're also working with OIT, and they kind of work on their own timetable. So yeah, if we get this out by next week, I will absolutely do it by next week. And I'll, like I said, I'll send it out as soon as I possibly can. And I'll give the 2 weeks. Preferably, if everything goes as smoothly as I'm hoping, we'll have the survey out, the responses back, and the data aggregated by the time we hold our next meeting. That's my hope.
Okay, good. All right, so then we'll have our next meeting and then maybe a working group right after that meeting, possibly? Or do we want to have maybe the week before that?
I think if the target is to have the data aggregated and ready to review by our next meeting, I think we should have the work group prior to the next meeting, just so we can, again, prep the tool for how we're going to integrate that new data.
What about, so the, keeping with the second Tuesday, our next meeting would be September 14th.
That's what I'm reading. Yeah.
Yeah. So what if we did a working group on Wednesday, September 7th, which would be the week prior? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm fine with that.
All right. Anyone have any significant issues with doing a working group on the 7th of September?
Yeah. And again,
Mr.
it's
Pierce? Oh, sorry, Mr. Pierce.
Sure. I'm a little worried that that time frame is a little aggressive, more aggressive than what will actually happen. So yeah, I guess I want to just raise the possibility that we're not going to have it all together by the next regular monthly meeting.
And that's always possible.
Yeah.
But that's
And then we'll
the
just
goal.
push. Nate,
Yeah.
Nate can reach out to everybody and say, hey, it's not ready, and we can push.
Right. I also just wanted to put in a plug for some follow-up methods that are frequently used that are often helpful, which is with a lot of mail programs, and I'm betting that Nate, you have some kind of access to it, but a lot of these mail programs, you'll have the ability to determine whether say put a link, for example, into the email and determine whether somebody's hit that link or whether they've responded. So you've got some kind of a sense of which individual recipients have replied and gone forward with filling out the survey. And then you can often then do targeted follow-up emails saying, we would love to have you fill out the survey. You haven't yet. And there's also the possibility of even though we're asking 2 weeks to do it within 2 weeks for psychology reasons, to also send out an email like maybe 2 days before then announcing an extension of some sort. So that might actually put a fire under people, give them a few more days, and get more responses that way. So if we did that, then we would have the data slightly later than what we would be counting on here, but we might get higher responses. But I was just trying to think through the logistics of how what's available to use through email programs and what you can know about respondents. And if we can take advantage of that, then that might be a good way to go. But if we did, I think that would also mean slightly later date from when we could compile all the information.
So to your first point, are you talking about sending the emails out and then tracking? Are you talking about read receipts? Like sending out an email with a read receipt and then basically you get an alert telling you that somebody has actually looked at it, like actually opened the email? Is that what you're talking about, or something different?
Well, that and another one, which is you can also track clicks of links. So if you've got, say, please fill out a survey here, and here is a link, you can also track whether they clicked the link.
Okay. I've never really done that before.
But it allows for you to do targeted follow-ups to try and get as many responses as possible.
I think if we're going to pursue something like that, and I'm happy to do that, like if we're reaching the tail end of 2 weeks and we've gotten 20 responses, I'm happy to then follow up. I'd want all of you to tell me what threshold is appropriate to do this, but I'm happy. It would probably be easier to just send another email blast the same way the first one went out and basically say, just a reminder, the deadline's in 2 days or something like that. I'm happy to do that, or extend it if everybody thinks that's appropriate. I'll do whatever y'all want me to do.
I don't have an opinion on this. let's just go with the normal. Let's just get the survey out and just do the normal program, I think.
I like the contingency. If our responses are low, maybe give an extension, but otherwise, this is a nice compromise, I guess.
Sure.
And
yeah,
I'm
whatever.
fine with that. You'll just have to tell me what is a low number. It's like I said, my hope is we'll get somewhere between 50 and 100 responses. You know, if we get 40, is that low enough for me to trigger sending out a reminder email? I'm happy to do that. I just would want to know what exactly you all want me to do.
Yeah, what number, Mr. Pierce?
It's hard to say. This is a low rate. It depends on the population of people of permits. I'm assuming just varies all over the board, from towers that have maybe 2 trucks to many, and so it's really hard to come up with a nice ideal figure there. And not knowing enough about the distribution of permits and the size of the companies, I wouldn't. If I had that information, I could give you a number. What would be nice to have is the total number of permits.
It's about somewhere around 700. Is that right, John?
It's between 700 and 800 at any given time.
Yeah. Okay. So
About
at least
50.
10%. At least 10% is good. 15 is really a good goal. Below 10%, you start to get representativeness issues.
Okay, how about 70? That's 10%. Does that work? Mr. Connolly.
If you're going for a number of 70, Nate, just plan on sending out a reminder.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. I think it will be under 10% regardless if we send a reminder out or not. Like I said, my hope is to get at least 50. I think if we're
Tell you what,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it'll probably take Nate less time to send a reminder than us to continue discussing this. So let's just send a reminder. How's that?
Okay. Do we want to extend it a week or just give a 2-day reminder?
Let's just do a 2-day reminder. Extend it. We're going to have less time to look at the data.
Okay. And people might still send stuff in, and if they do, I'll probably include it anyway.
Yeah,
So,
great.
okay. 2-day reminder. You got it.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Riley. And actually, Mr. Riley, just in general, you and your team, I know y'all are understaffed and even more busy than you used to be. So we appreciate you doing all this work for us.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. It's 3:28. We got 30 minutes before we go to public comment time. Does anyone have anything outside of the current topic that they'd like to discuss? All right. So in that case, let's roll into public comment time. I believe we have 2 individuals on. Mr. Marvin Quijano. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Mr. Troy Porras. Mr. Quijano, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, I will have you go first. And you might be on mute, possibly. Okay, we'll go over to Mr. Porras. Mr. Porras, do you have any comments or questions? Mr. Porras just sent a message. I do not have any. I don't have anything else for Mr. Quijano, so looks like that concludes public comment time. So it looks like we're done early. So unless anyone has other items, Mr. Riley.
Just one last thing, and I know Dr. Pierce, you had mentioned being aggressive with our timeline and all that in regards to getting everything, all the data, the survey sent out, the responses back, the data aggregated and everything by our next meeting. I think we have to be aggressive because, even though we got the 2-month extension based on the tow legislation, the legislature did splice in another angle that we have to consider in regards to the recommendations we're making to the commission, and it's due by November 1st. And I mean, that's not even taking into consideration the fact that we have to not only get the data, we have to analyze the data, we have to talk about the data, we have to, you know, have discussions about what the data means, and then we have to then transpose all of that into an actual productive and comprehensive report. So I mean, there's a lot to do between now and November, so we have to start being pretty aggressive and strategic with our time to make sure that we can meet that deadline. So that was my only comment is, you know, I think we're going to have our work cut out from us as soon as we get and that's why I suggested having that additional work group between now and the next scheduled meeting on the 14th, is because we got to use every, you know, bit of time that we have available to us as that November 1st deadline is closing in. So that's why I think that work group is a good idea between now and the 14th, because we can use that time to look at the tool we have available to us, the cost model from the last towing task force, and we can kind of start tailoring it towards what our survey data is going to look like. And then that way, hopefully we'll have a pretty good way to insert that new data into the tool when it's available to us, when it's been, you know, compiled and aggregated, so that we, again, cut down on the time, you know, that we're spending, you know, just waiting for things to happen. So that was all I'd say. Trevor, can we just finalize the dates and times of our next meeting and any potential work group?
Yep. So I believe we're for the working group, Wednesday, September 7th, again from 2 to 4 p.m. for the working group. And then the next meeting is that following Wednesday, which would be Wednesday, September 14th from 2 to 4 p.m.
All right. I will send out invites on that, if not today, before the end of the week.
Awesome.
And
Thank you.
I do appreciate responses. Just indicate when you see the email, just clicking that you are going to attend or not going to attend. And if you're not going to attend, if you could please shoot me an email and let me know, especially if you have somebody else who's going to be standing in for you. That really helps me out. So I'd appreciate that.
Great. Okay, everybody. Thank you for your time, and look forward to talking again soon.